Welcome to Transcendent. I'm Raya, and I'm the daughter.
And I'm Joe, and I'm the dad.
You know, this podcast is about being your most authentic self. And you know, sometimes people's bodies don't match their brains. People like me have to change our outside appearance to match who we are on the inside. And that's why I dyed my hair blonde. Sometimes people like us will be called content creators because we're creating things and then we're putting it out there week after week, creating content, whether it's YouTube or podcasts or whatever. You're always looking for different things that you can use for content.
Yes, and I will tell you, that is in itself quite a job. Every one of our podcasts takes research. We don't want to give you information that is false information or information that we don't know what we're talking about.
How to keep families and friendships together when someone is LGBTQ. There are so many different things that we can cover. We are at no loss for topics, but every one of those, it always takes a lot.
It's not just sitting down and talking for a half hour and we're done. Just producing the podcast of itself takes about 3 or 4 hours, sometimes more, depending on who the guest is. And then in addition to that, there is all the research we do ahead of time.
So today we thought one topic that would be easy for us and that we could mine for some content that you would be really interested in is we would dig deep into all of my insecurities and lay them out there. And actually, this is a little bit nerve-wracking. It feels a little bit like, oh, I'm going to be exposing some things here about how I really feel and the things that are hard as a transgender person. One of the reasons that I don't talk about them is because they are hard. It's some of those insecurities are the very things that I want to try to hide and push down and just tell the world, well, I'm normal just like everyone else.
Yes, you're normal in that you have issues just like everyone else.
Yes.
On the other hand, I will say that some of our most popular podcasts were podcasts where you were ready to bare your soul, talk about what you really went through and how that happened. And those are the ones that still keep getting the hits.
So we figured we would dive in here on this, and I'm going to do my best to kind of share a little bit about what I've been going through. Now, I have been seeing a therapist, and I highly recommend that more people should see a therapist if you have an option to do so. I grew up thinking, and I'm sure you grew up thinking this way, Dad, that seeing a therapist was, oh, you're really, you must have some kind of a problem.
Well, if you didn't have a problem, I'm sure you wouldn't.
I guess not. Well, not necessarily, though, because even therapists themselves will talk about how beneficial it's been for themselves to see somebody else because it helps you examine some of the unexamined aspects of who you are to have a healthier relationship with yourself and how you interact with your past and everything.
Well, I remember one of the most interesting things about The Sopranos was that he was seeing a therapist and he would tell her just about anything. And it was just interesting to see the particular episodes where they had these conversations. It was very interesting. And it really gave therapists a much better image of themselves. It was probably one of the first shows that did something like that. It was pretty good. Of course, there was a Bob Newhart show.
Oh, he was quite good, I think, if I recall.
Yeah.
I don't know. But of course, the old joke goes, anybody that wants to see a psychiatrist ought to have their head examined.
Exactly.
But really, we want to destigmatize that. And I have found a lot of value in my relationship with a therapist. And in fact, there was a time where I was looking at getting into full-time ministry, going back into full-time ministry. And they strongly, strongly encourage me to keep a relationship with a therapist and at least to check in every 6 months or a year just to make sure, because there can be so many pressures, especially from being in ministry, but maybe for being in a job or just doing anything, just living life. There can be so many pressures. It's good to check in from time to time.
So, my first question for you is, when did you first see a therapist and why did you feel you should?
Well, I never saw a therapist until I first started dealing with my gender issues.
Mm-hmm.
But once I did, I realized that there was a lot of value to doing so because it was an objective person that I knew was not going to reject me and that could give me some feedback and a different perspective on my problems.
My second question to you is, the therapist that you saw early on, was that the therapist you've stayed with all this time?
No, I have actually switched 3 or 4 different times. And oftentimes it will be because I'm going through a period where I need to see somebody for a while, and then I kind of am done for a little bit. So then we go to maybe every 3 months or every 6 months or once a year. And in fact, my current therapist, I saw her for about 2 years, I think. And then I had a period about a year ago and I said, I think I'm kind of done here right now. I've kind of gotten to where we need to be. Let me check in with you again in about a year. And so I did. It was about a year later. And then I had this current set of things that has been coming up that I would like to talk about now because it's really been at the forefront of my mind right now. And so now for the past 2 months, I've been seeing her a lot more.
You mentioned early on this podcast that when I was young, that was seen as a different type of image. So I understand that today it's completely different, and that's great. My first question is this so expensive that you're going to have to sell your house to keep doing it, or does your insurance pay for it?
For the one that I'm seeing right now, because I have a good relationship with her, unfortunately, she does not take insurance. So I'm paying her out of pocket, but I have a health savings account, and I'm able to use that to pay for it. So I'm at least able to do it tax-free, which is nice. But most therapists are going to take some kind of coverage, and there's almost certainly somebody that you can see to do that. But nobody says if you go to a physical doctor, nobody says, oh, wow, you must have some real problems if you're going to see a doctor.
Right.
We all know you go in to check in once a year for that. Why would it be different for our mental health?
So I've got another question yet.
Yeah.
So then does each therapist specialize in a certain area?
Many will. And if you go out to their website, they will oftentimes show the specific specialties that they will have. So one might do marriage and family. One might do LGBTQ. One might do issues with depression. One might do issues with self-esteem.
Like doctors.
Yes.
But when you said one might do LGBTQ, my question to you there is, are there specialties within that? So like, well, I'm just a foot doctor or
Yes, there are. There are specifically some therapists that are called, I believe they're called gender therapists. And I've never actually seen a gender therapist. I have seen more of a generalized training with LGBTQ plus issues because we are in a more rural area. It's a little more difficult. However, that is really an assumption that's worth challenging right now because now in 2024, now that we've gone through COVID a few years ago and everybody has developed an online presence, it is more easy than ever to see somebody online. And that's why our sponsor today is BetterHelp. No, just kidding. I watch a lot of other content producers, and BetterHelp is a very, very popular sponsor on those. They are not a sponsor for our podcast, though we might want to look into getting them. But there are places like that where you can go and set up and do an online basically a webcam visit with a therapist right now.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, my company does give me the option that when I go through a life traumatic experience, I forget, it's 4 or 6 free sessions with one of those counselors for any life event, which is nice. And when we were going through a big family traumatic experience a couple years ago, I looked into seeing somebody at that point specifically for the grief that I was going through with an illness in the family. I ended up not going to that visit because I had other things going on, but I know if things had gotten worse, I would have really pressed hard into that because that would have been really critical for me in that moment. There could be lots of things that we go through that just having that objective person can be really helpful. They're not going to fix you, but they will give you some perspective. They'll be able to mirror back to you how you're feeling, and then you can say, well, no, that's not quite it, and help you really understand what your feelings are and clarify those. And then they can take out some strategies that you can use that they have learned from the research. They're trained in all the research, and they can say, some researchers have said that doing X and Y can help, and they can help you explore those kinds of things.
Is it more likely that people in the LGBTQ community would benefit from a therapist, or is it the same as everything else, like we say it is?
Absolutely. I think because of the challenges that are placed on LGBTQ people in our society, and I'm thinking through every one of the letters, lesbians, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning, or any of the other letters that we add, where sometimes we'll call that as plus. Every single one of those carries a unique set of challenges that when you speak with somebody that's specially trained can be absolutely beneficial. I don't know that I would have made it through what I was dealing with prior to transition apart from having a therapist. And at some points when I was really struggling and not wanting to transition, she was my lifeline. She literally kept me alive at times where I thought, I don't know if I can make it another day.
Can we say the same thing about people who are affirming or trying to be affirming, or people who are allies, or people who are listening to this podcast because they have a relative, maybe a son, a daughter, or a parent that is LGBTQ, and they're having a hard time dealing with that? Can we say the same thing about them? They can benefit them from this?
I think absolutely, especially if they're having a hard time dealing with it. Anytime you're going through something and you're having a hard time dealing with it, that's exactly the time where it can be helpful to see a therapist. So I met with my therapist today. I discussed some issues that I've had with some deep insecurities for a long, long time. And everybody that knows me, all of my friends, have heard me talk about these for a long time. I have some kind of an issue where I'm so happy with my transition socially. I'm so happy when I go to the grocery store and I just get to be myself. Or if we go out to a formal event, maybe I have tickets to go see an off-Broadway play. Or we're going anything. When I'm out and about, I'm so happy to finally be able to be myself socially. But when it comes to getting closer, that can be very difficult for me.
What do you mean getting closer?
Well, like a romantic relationship.
I see. So closer in one-on-one relationships is what you're saying.
Yes. Now, I have no problem with friendships.
Yeah.
But when it comes to romance, that's been very, very difficult. And there's been a long time where I've said, I don't know how to come to terms with myself. That, for instance, I have discovered there are a lot of people that will frequently tell me how attractive they think that I am in a variety of different contexts. And no matter how many times they will tell me that, I don't believe them. That doesn't ring true to me. And I realized in doing some of this self-work, I asked myself, do I think that they believe what they're saying? And I realized, yes, I absolutely think that. I don't think anyone is lying to me. But I kind of don't even care what they think because I don't feel that on the inside. So my own perception of myself trumps what they think. It doesn't matter what they think because all that I care about in that moment is what I think.
Your self-image.
Yes, my self-image. And now that can be a really good thing if you have a positive self-image, that everybody else can really be down on you, and that can carry you through those hard times because you might think you are a laugh a minute. and everybody else is kind of rolling their eyes. But ultimately,
I have to correct you on that. I don't think I'm a laugh a minute. I know I'm a laugh a minute.
And I will tell you, to you listening in the audience, if you've never got a chance to meet my dad in person, his attitude and his positivity and his excitement for life and his humor is infectious. Not because he's trying to be that way, but because he does know that that's who he is. So that can be a really positive thing where who you are, it just trumps what everybody else thinks about you. But if you have a negative self-view, that can also be. And so I've been really trying to figure out, why do I keep this thing? And I realized at some point, I'm keeping it because it's doing something for me. If it wasn't providing something for me that is beneficial, if it wasn't protecting me in some way or keeping me away from some perceived harm, I would have gotten rid of it a long time ago. But I've kept it around for some reason. Why have I kept it around? And so I had a long conversation then with my therapist today about that. And I just kind of went through all of the observations that I've had about myself. And she said, and I thought this was a really good compliment. She said, you really have a lot of self-understanding. And I said, well, I've really put a lot of time in on this. I've done a lot of journaling and just thinking through, why do I feel this way? And just trying to get to the root of this.
And have you defined for our audience, what do you mean by feeling this way?
I don't know. So for me, this way means when somebody tells me that I'm really beautiful or that I'm pretty or that I'm attractive, my immediate feeling is, yuck. That doesn't ring true. It feels gross. It feels yucky. It feels, I don't like it. I want them to stop. And if I dwell on what they're saying to me too much, I feel like inside I'll have a piece that comes up and wants to counteract it with all of the reasons why they're wrong. And I can very easily find myself going into this downward spiral of feeling depressed about who I am. And then I'm even more confused because I think, this came from somebody giving me a compliment. Why did that send me into this downward spiral? It's just very strange. And it is as strange to me as it is to you as I'm telling you this. I don't know why I feel this way. All I know, because when I think through it logically, I think that does not make any sense. But I had a revelation today as I was speaking with my therapist. She was kind of probing, well, what's going on when you're feeling that way? Let's talk about that a little bit. And I said, no matter what I do, no matter what surgeries I have, no matter how much work I do on my voice, no matter how much I work on my mannerisms, no matter how put together my appearance is, or my makeup or my look or anything that I have, and women have to do a lot of things. If you're following stereotypical social roles, what you have to do as a man and what a woman has to do, so much more that you have to do now on my side. I've had to learn all of that through my transition that, oh, it's not just a quick process of, oh, well, you just, you shave and throw on a shirt and you're all set to go. It takes a little more than that.
Right. It takes you a lot longer time. It takes Mom a lot longer time to get ready. And for me, it's very easy. But on the other hand, I don't mind that she does it. I don't mind waiting for it. I just know how that goes. But I'm thankful that I don't have to do all that.
And I was thankful too until I got to start doing it. And now there can be aspects of it that are kind of fun. It feels really affirming to me. And especially the times where I do look in the mirror and I think, oh, I really like how I look right now. That feels really, really good. But many times I don't feel that way. And I realized it doesn't matter to me how much of that I do. I could do everything to perfection. But one thing I can never change is my history. And so I have this piece that's hanging around with me, almost like I'm dragging a big weight, like I'm holding a big rope that's tied to a weight. And no matter where I go, this weight is just dragging me around. And that is the history of all of the things that I did prior to transition that were meant to affirm me as a man. I did a lot of things as a man, quote unquote. We had a joke that when I graduated from high school, you came up to me and you shook my hand and you said,
"Today you are a man."
Yes. And then when I graduated from college, you shook my hand again and said,
"Today you are a man."
And when I got my first job and when I got every one of those life events, you did the same thing and it became a running joke. And at the time, it felt good to earn that rite of passage. It never felt affirming to be a man, but it did feel affirming to have earned that rite of passage.
I intend to say that to Aaron when he goes into the military.
Yeah, I'm very proud of him. My son has enlisted with the Marines, and so he'll be joining this fall. And I'm very proud.
I am too.
I discovered, though, that all of those things that at the time I was using to try to cover up something that I knew on the inside I had, and I felt like I was broadcasting it to the world. I felt like when I came out that you and Mom were going to say to me, well, we've known all this time. We were just wondering when you would know. And I was really, really shocked when you had no idea. And it turns out that everybody around me didn't know. But I knew. I had a constant sense on the inside that this is not who I am. And that never went away. So I assumed, because I was feeling it, that I must be broadcasting that somehow to everyone else. So I worked really, really hard not to broadcast that to other people. And so when I found out that you didn't know, in some sense, it gave me a sense of affirmation that I did a good job of hiding it. And some of that same thing that I did to hide it then has helped me to similarly learn now on this side of transition, what are all the social things that I need to do to fit in now as a woman? So that whatever that characteristic is that I have has been really, really helpful.
But it's the history that has been holding you back.
Yeah, so because I did so well, I feel like, what right do I have to really be an attractive woman if I had done all of those things as a man before?
What did you learn today from that therapy session that you think will help you? And has it had an effect immediately?
Well, I was really surprised. It was near the end of this hour-long session, or 50 minutes, or however long we go, that I was telling the story, and I just remembered going out for recess and seeing the girls over to the side playing hopscotch or jumping rope. That was a highly gendered thing. Both of those were highly gendered activities when I was growing up.
What was this? Third grade, second grade?
I remember being on the far side of the grade school, so that would have been third grade because we did first and second grade down the road. So that must have been third grade that I remember that. And going out and feeling like I had a longing to go over there and play with those girls. But I knew at that point, if I did, not only would other people laugh at me, but I also knew if I let my guard down, if I let myself experience what I really, really wanted to do on the inside, who knew where that would lead? That could lead to me wanting to become a girl.
Interesting.
And in fact, it did later on in life, of course. I knew that once the floodgate was open, I didn't know if I could hold it back any longer. So I policed myself a lot. And I discovered as I told that story, and when I realized that that was connected in my mind, that I missed out on this experience, this formative experience that most girls have. They just do girl things. My girl thing that I missed out on was that. And it was when I take my girls to go for cheerleading right now. They love cheerleading. Those have been hard as I watch them. I mean, I'm very, very proud of them. But internally, I've had some yearning and some grieving because I missed out on my experience to be a cheerleader. I would have loved being a cheerleader. And when I was in middle school and in high school, when I would go to the basketball games, I barely ever watched the game. I would sit in front of the cheerleaders and I knew every one of those cheers. And I knew them because I didn't really know why I cared so much, but I knew deep down inside I wanted to be there with them. I yearned to be able to do that. And as I put these experiences together, I realized I feel like I'm lacking the history, and instead I have the wrong history. So that when somebody else wants to get close to me, I know in my head that I have this history. And so in my mind, they're getting close to somebody that has, and I was looking for the right word for it today. I couldn't find it then, but since then, I'm thinking aspects of manhood that I brought with me from my history. Even if I've completely gotten rid of them from my day-to-day life, I still have that history of having done all of those man and boy things and been successful at them. And I feel like if I let somebody too close to me right now, they're going to see those parts of me, as well as maybe any other parts that I have not seen for myself yet or looked at or examined. And if somebody sees that part, I feel incredibly, incredibly self-conscious about it. And I would rather not let somebody close to me than to see a part of me that I would say is representing that manhood. It was so important to me that I left a marriage that was a really good, life-giving marriage because I couldn't be a man any longer. I couldn't act out that role. I couldn't keep that manhood any longer. And so when I get into a situation now where I feel like that's going to come back, if I gave up everything that was important to me in my life at that time in order to avoid feeling those feelings, well, of course, I'm going to continue doing that now.
What your story is telling us, how can that be represented with other people? For example, we've got people out there who came out as gay, and earlier they didn't. Were they playing a part in it, and it's now holding them back?
I think that these pieces and the stories that we tell ourselves run so deep that every one of our stories is going to be different. There will be aspects that you'll resonate with me on, and there'll be aspects where it's just, I understand you're going through a difficult thing, and we all go through something so dramatically different. I think on these are all very, very personal. In this case, I was given some homework to go and take some of those stories that I went through in my life and to go and write them out, but rewrite them from my perspective now as Raya.
Oh,
And
interesting.
to reframe my past so that I can deal with my past in a way that I'm not carrying this residual manhood along with me that feels like an anchor holding me down. And instead, I can be the woman that I have always really longed to be.
And when you do that, when you begin to write that out and see it from the perspective of a girl rather than as a boy, do you think that will be pleasant for you or difficult for you?
Exceptionally affirming. When you tell stories about me pre-transition and you use my correct pronouns, or you call me she, you say, when Raya was a kid, she did such and such. That feels so deeply affirming to me. What I need to do is take that same principle and just multiply that out through my history. And I'm really optimistic that this is going to be, it's like crossing the top of a hill after a long journey up. And when we finished this session today, my therapist said, I feel like this session today is why I got into doing what I do. This breakthrough that we had, everything that we've had leading up to this has been the time right now. And this moment right here is why I got into what I do.
Well, you should have said at that point, if this is that rewarding for you, can you cut my fee?
That would have been helpful. Hopefully this podcast has been rewarding for you, and we will gladly cut our fee for you in half.
Exactly. Now, if you're listening to this and you're thinking something else, you've got a different angle on what Raya just said, we want to hear from you. You can write Raya at transcendent@gmail.com.
If you would like to support this podcast, you can go to transcendent.com and click on the donate button.
As little as $3. All of the donations we get go right back into the podcast. We are trying to save lives one podcast at a time now, and we're glad you're part of it.
We're happy to be your voice of positivity here every Monday.
And we'll see you Monday.